The next time you're at a party and somebody asks you, hey, what's the difference, man, between angels and spirits? You can say, it's where you are. It's where you are geographically and where you are in a process that determines the distinctions that lead us to call people angels or spirits. Follow along. This is Divine Love and Wisdom 140. And I'm telling you, we can't just, Swedenborg's not just going to give us out an answer like that for free. It always has to be within the packaging of a larger principle. Why learn the distinction between angels and spirits? How can that tell us more about the overall picture and the overall structure of reality? Why is there this distinction? You see, 140, where we start, we're labeling it under this. Every kind of spirit turns toward her or his ruling love in the same way. We've got our spirits that we're talking about. What's this ruling love character that we've got in here? And what does all this have to do with angel and spirit? Yeah, that's what we're here for. First, I need to define angel and spirit. Let's give them some colors. Immediately after death, we come into a world of spirits that is halfway between heaven and hell. This is the geographic part of the distinction. So then that, unfortunately, calls for diagram. So we've got us, let's say here is earth, or I should say the physical side of things. Up here you got heaven. Yep, I'm going to write the whole word. And then down here you got hell. And right here is the world of spirits. There we work through, what are we doing in the world of spirits? We work through our stretches of time or our states and are prepared either for heaven or for hell, depending on the way that we've lived. As long as we stay in this world, we're called spirits. Okay, what's a spirit? A spirit is somebody who's not physical anymore, but is in this world of spirits, this place where we're getting prepared. And really, we're bringing the process in already, because this is where we work through our stretches of time. We work through our states. When we're here, we're called a spirit. Not so bad, right? That's pretty tangible. And the headline that is a little bit, or the lead that's a little bit buried here, is that it's all angels, spirits, us. It's all the same thing. They're all people. It's just a different stage on the journey and a different location. It's kind of like to a kid. Do they really understand that kids turn into big kids and that those turn into teenagers and that those turn into adults? They seem like they're different species, but it's just about progression along a chronological timeline, but also a state. It's partially because we think differently at those stages. So anyone who has been brought up from this world, the world of spirits, into heaven is called an angel. So all you got to do to become an angel is go through these times or states that prepare you for heaven. Once you get there, that's when we're talking about angel. A for angel. And anyone who has been cast into hell, is called a Satan or devil. So you're down here, and you can be called a Satan or a devil. All right. As long as we're in the world of spirits, people who are being readied for heaven are called angelic spirits. Okay, let's complicate it a little bit. So you have two varieties of spirits. You have your angelic spirits, and people who are being readied for hell are called hellish spirit. So even while we're here, being readied for heaven or readied for hell lets you know there's something a little more subtle than just you're judged and thrown into hell. Because what's this readying process? Actually, this is you sorting out that's really hell is where you want to be, because it supports the kind of things that you love, which is cruelty and revenge and selfishness. So even while we're in this and we're getting sorted out, some of us are getting our training to go up and some are getting the training to go down. And naturally, this is not because you've been selected or somebody thought this is what you deserve. This is because this is a reflection of what we are inside, what we've cultivated over our life in the world. Everything, remember, is about this ruling love. The ruling love in hell, as we'll get to in a minute, is loving everything that is harmful. And the ruling love in heaven is loving everything that's helpful and universal and being of service to other human beings. So if we've got that stuff inside, the world of spirits, being a spirit is you're sorting that out, and you're either in the process of, if you love what's good and true, you're shedding everything that's evil and false. And if you love what's evil and false, you're shedding everything that's good and true. So you can be an angelic spirit or a hellish spirit. All the while, angelic spirits are united to heaven, and hellish spirits are united to hell, which might seem like a detail, but it's very important in what's coming up. So this arrow is not just a prediction of the future. You're actually in touch with communities in hell or in touch with communities in heaven. And this is about to get really personal for all of us. All the spirits who are in the world of spirits are together with us. Notice how we're on the same level here, because we are similarly between heaven and hell as to the deeper levels of our minds. Through these spirits, we are in touch with either heaven or hell, depending on the way that we're living. So if we're living the life that connects us to hellish spirits, we actually, it's a chain, but through them, we are receiving feedback and input in the form of thoughts and feelings from whatever community in hell supports the kind of stuff that we're making our life. And on a more pleasant note, the same thing with heaven. That we can actually, the stuff that comes down into our consciousness day to day, when we're hanging out and we are making decisions where we see something and we know, like, here's an opportunity. And I have my system of ethics, that's here. And through the filter of that, I'm weighing that against my urges, the will side of things. And overall, should I act on this or not? That is the formation of the spirit, but also that is being influenced by heaven and hell. That heaven is trying to send down illuminating, clarifying stuff that will hopefully get us to choose something that aligns with system of ethics and the positive stuff in the will, whereas hell is trying to influence us to say, doesn't matter the impact on someone else, it just matters the gratification for you. And they're both sort of trying to recruit us into that kind of lifestyle. And this is what it is to be a human being, is to have these inputs from both sides and be able to, you've got the menu, and what are we choosing off of it? Depending on the way we're living. It should be clear that the world of spirits is not the same thing as the spiritual world. Classic mistake, rookie mistake, Swedenborg mistake, is the world of spirits is the one I've just been talking about. World of spirits is this little slice of this whole afterlife picture, while the spiritual world includes that world, heaven, and hell. The spiritual world is this whole thing. Anything that's non-physical, anything that's the afterlife is what Swedenborg would call the spiritual world. Just in case at that very same party we mentioned in the beginning, someone says, what's the difference between the world of spirits and the spiritual world? Obviously, I haven't been to very many parties. So there we have our geography and a bit of our process. But what was this whole thing up here about why you got to throw this ruling love into it? And why include angel and spirit definitions under this heading? So here's where we tie it in, because this is the principle that really drives everything about the human experience, which this stuff, all this heaven, hell, these groupings of us, our connections, the things we live and love and act on, are just sort of symptoms or effects of the underlying cause, which is the ruling love, the thing that drives us. Something also needs to be said about loves, since we're talking about how angels and spirits turn toward their loves because of their loves. Heaven as a whole is laid out in communities depending on all the difference in loves. So is hell, and so is the world of spirits. Everything there. Why do we have even something that you could represent in a diagram as having vertically stratified layers? Why is it space rather than it's all just one single point or singularity in the middle? Why? Physically, there is space. Swedenborg says there's no such thing in the spiritual world, but why this distance? Why an arrangement? Why is there a form to the different places we end up? It all has to do with what you love. That takes the place of location. So when I talk about you can be prepared for hell, and is because that's where you want to go. When you hear the word hell, it's like, no, nobody wants to go to hell. What hell is, according to Swedenborg, is the love of all these harmful, antisocial, gross kind of things. Each species of that, each particular attraction to something that's really harmful to you and to others, there is a home for that. Everything, if you go out and look at what's all the depravity you see in the human race, each individual urge has its sort of community or its home base in the spiritual world. Same thing with everything good. Everything that's ever moved you or inspired you or taught you something about what love and truth is, there's like an essential home for that somewhere in the spiritual world, and the people who are most deeply united to that come together and occupy that space, and then they're there as a potential hookup for us. If we're pursuing that love, we become more and more united to them. Heaven, though, is laid out in communities according to the differences in heavenly loves. Interesting that love, which usually has a positive connotation, Swedenborg says, it can be good or bad. You can love. So love just means a strong attraction or motivation to do something. You can love something that's totally bad, and people certainly do. While hell is laid out in communities according to differences in hellish loves, and the world of spirits is laid out in communities according to differences in both heavenly and hellish loves. There's a little more dwelling together of these, though, in the spiritual world, because it's a sorting place. I mean, the world of spirits. I just made that classic Swedenborg rookie mistake that I was just harping on there. Here, they're a little more together because the whole process is how do we eventually distill think about it like a centrifuge. This thing is going around. The stuff that's trying to get lower gets lower. The stuff that's trying to get higher gets higher. And now we get into what's the general categories? How could you sort all of this stuff? You're talking about heaven and hell. There are two loves that are at the head of all the rest, and two loves that lie behind all the rest. So we're about to get the recipe. What's heaven? How many times is he going to write the whole word of heaven and the whole world of hell here? What are the fundamental, existential, elemental differences between what it is to be in heaven and what it is to be in hell? The head of all heavenly loves, the love basic to them all, is love for the Lord. So heaven is love for the Lord. Lifto. What's the most beautiful acronym in the world? The head of all hellish loves, or the love that underlies them all, is and this one's much more clearly descriptive, is a love of controlling prompted by self-love. Okay. I wouldn't have thought of that, but if you start to let that percolate through your understanding of motivation and why people act like they do, okay, I could see that. This is the root of all evil, rather than money. This is actually the root of all evil. A love of controlling prompted by self-love. Kispizl. These two loves are absolute opposites. So to say you're in this middle world and you're either being prepared for heaven or either being prepared for hell, that sounds a bit like a reward and punishment system, and some people are lucky to go live in a good neighborhood. Others are unlucky and victimized by being put into a bad neighborhood. But if you think about it like this, that the world of spirits is being prepared either to devote your life to love for the Lord. And I do have to pause here, and I always have to when Swedenborg talks about love for the Lord. What love for the Lord is, you could say, this is veneration of a deity and saying you're so great for being God, but it's actually not, because if you're actually loving something, you're loving what it is and does, and the Lord is, even though you can approach the Lord as a person, the Lord is love of usefulness or love of creating happiness in other people. So that's what the Lord is constantly doing. So to really love the Lord is loving, creating happiness for other people. That's how it would show up in you. So you can put it as love of usefulness or love of heaven or just love of making people happy. That's happy in whatever way is long-term going to be a long-term health increase for them. That's what love for the Lord is. And hell is a love of controlling prompted by self-love. That is relatively self-explanatory. And in controlling, I'd say you could also translate as, not that I'm a translator, as ruling. Love of ruling or being in charge, prompted by self-love. So if you look at the choice between heaven and hell, is you're being prepared to devote your life to love for usefulness, or to devote your life to trying to control others because you want to rule. Then suddenly it makes total sense to make a distinction there and to move those people apart. And that those two loves, these are as far apart spiritually as you can possibly get. There is the most distance in between. There's billions of spiritual light years in between those. So this is why those things move so far apart. That these are actually, and you can think of it over for yourself and understand it and drill down into it. As we meditate on it, you can come to see these are the opposite. These are the farthest apart from each other. Because one is enabling the happiness of others and leaving them their independence and freedom, and the other one is just basically seeing everyone else as disposable because you're chasing the pleasure of ruling because you want to feel good. These are absolute opposites. Since these two loves, love for the Lord and love of controlling prompted by self-love, are absolute opposites, I just said it because I was copying him saying it again. And since everyone who is caught up in love for the Lord turns toward the Lord as the Son, as explained in the preceding section, you can go and check it out yourself. But again, spiritual distance and even orientation, because turning is just moving in distance around an axis rather than on a trajectory or whatever you'd call that. That is a function of the spiritual conditions. So you love the Lord, which is love of usefulness. You turn toward that spiritually. It stands to reason that everyone who is caught up in a love of controlling prompted by self-love turns away from the Lord. Because you need to get as far away from the opposite as you possibly can, and that really evil and hell is not turning toward anything, it's just turning away from God and divine love and wisdom. I'm sure you've heard it before, the idea that darkness is actually just the absence of light, cold is the absence of heat. Spiritually, God exists, and anything that's outside that is really just an illusion. It's just the blocking out of the truth. That's what, if you think about it, controlling based on self-love, of ruling other people based on self-love, is a total illusion, because it rests on the idea that you're more important than other people, and that there isn't this, that you aren't an equal participant. It's all, you have to block out reality to really clean your conscience out enough that you can go and live like that. The reason people turn in opposite directions is that those who are caught up in love for the Lord love being, there's this interesting wrinkle in here. Love being led by the Lord more than anything else, and want the Lord alone to be in control. So something's got to control, and you can get into a state where, and you can think of it like, again, this person of the Lord is telling you what to do and you just follow orders, and why is that such a blissful state? But if you're actually saying that the Lord is objectively what is right, true, fair, honest, just, these qualities are intrinsic to the person of the Lord, to say, I want what's good, to be in control, even when, so that if I step out of what's good and start acting selfishly, I don't want that to rule just because it's me. That's what the making of society and laws are, that we're trying to design a system where we say, doesn't matter who's involved. Isn't this a principle we all admire and aspire to? Doesn't matter who's involved. If they break what's good and true, then they have to have some kind of penalty for that, because we're trying to set up on a pedestal what's good and true. That's what being led by the Lord is. It doesn't matter if I want something. If it crosses the line of good and true, then I would rather be led by what's good and true. In contrast, if people are caught up in a love of controlling prompted by self-love, there's nothing they love more than leading themselves. They want to be the only ones who are in control. The reference point is, what do I want? And does it make me feel good? That's what matters. Everything, morality becomes completely subjective. Other people's experiences are not taken into account. I want to control. That is the root of all these problems. The reason we refer to a love of controlling prompted by self-love is that there is a love of controlling out of a love of service. It's not all bad to want to be able to influence and even manage a situation, but it's got to be out of a love of service. Since this love acts in unison with love for our neighbor, it's a spiritual love. If you really want to get to a position of influence, and we've done other episodes about this, because you want to make things better, that's really the same thing as loving the Lord. In fact, it cannot truly be called a love of being in control. It should be called a love of service. That's the difference. you're really thinking, I think I can help, that's why I want to be here, versus I want to be here because I want to be in control because of my self-love. That's the difference. And think about that. We end a conversation on the difference between spirits and angels, talking about this motivation that applies to all of us right now, because it's all just one system. It's all geography and process, like we saw up here, but we're in here right now. We're in that progression as we speak. And the more that we can understand the full trajectory of it, the full path of it, the more we can start to lead our lives by these principles. Now, that should make it so that we learn about angels and spirits. So that's not just this unnecessary or sort of fantastical knowledge, but this is basically learning about what it's like to be in college before you get to college. This is preparing us for how we can right now be connecting to angelic spirits who are connected right to heaven, and create this pipeline so that love for the Lord, which is love for the good and the well-being of all of us, flows through and makes heaven here, because the system's all set up to let that heaven connect right through and come out here. So we can be putting in the work to create the receiver for that now, like today, like this very second. And that's the news from heaven. Thanks, guys, so much for being willing to check that out. Leave comments. I would really love to hear, how does that strike you? What do you get out of it? How are you doing today? And then like and subscribe if you haven't already. Support us. This lets us put out content regularly. We're a nonprofit. We don't make... did I charge you any money to see this, right? But it takes money to make, so check out otlemonthly.cosvox.com. Become a monthly supporter. This is the way you get Swedenborgian programming to be on the air. So I appreciate getting to have the time to work through this with you, and I hope that you feel connected to angelic spirits who are connected to heaven, and that shines through, and everybody can notice, today. And I hope you notice the safety and the energizing effect of that connection, and it gives you a good time. Thanks for hanging out.